Welcome to China Tech Talk, the almost weekly show about technology and startups here in China. I am John Artman, editor-in-chief of technode.com, joined as always by Matthew Brennan, founder of China Channel. And so this week we wanted to look at ByteDance. And I think that ByteDance has gotten a lot of attention in the last few months, in particular because they've made some aggressive expansion into the United States. Of course, here in China, you'll recognize them by their one of their original flagship product, Jinri Toutiao, or today's headlines. But I think that most people these days are more familiar with Douyin or TikTok if you are outside of China. And so today we thought we'd talk a little bit about them, some of the challenges that they're facing, but then also to be honest, the gargantuan success that they actually have been.
So yeah, we covered ByteDance on the podcast with Danny Lee from Tencent last year, if I remember correctly, talking about Toutiao. I think that was the first time we covered them, right? And it's quite amazing to think that things have changed so much. That podcast was actually one of our most popular episodes, right? If I remember correctly, John, it was a very popular episode back last year, but things have changed so much for that company, and in a positive way as well. Is that I think today what we'll be covering will be totally different from what we talked about a year ago.
Well, it's kind of funny because so for us covering them, there was a period of time where we were a bit unsure. Wait a second, are they Toutiao or should we call them ByteDance? And then they actually did a real rebranding. And so now, ByteDance is the parent company, and then there's Toutiao, which is a separate company, ByteDance and TikTok, which are separate companies, and then of course product teams inside there. But, I think that looking back, just a bit of history, Jinri Toutiao, when it first came out, I think I've said this a few times already, but at the time, it was really just kind of another app, another news reading app. It had recommendation algorithms that it used, and that made it very, very sticky. But since then, Toutiao itself grew out of only being news and really kind of moved into just a lot of different types of content. And then, of course, ByteDance, they had a few other content apps, like a joke app, Nehanduanzi, which unfortunately was taken down from app stores. They've since re-released the app. It's basically Nehanduanzi, but it's called something else now. But the big thing for ByteDance, of course, is Douyin and TikTok. I think that Matt, when we talked about ByteDance, Douyin was just getting started. It was barely a blip. That was when Kuaishou was really the only major player in the short video market, and the amount of growth that Douyin has had has just been staggering, absolutely staggering.
It's definitely the tech story for China of 2018, I think. Still, I don't think anything comes close to the implications of what happened with TikTok and first with Douyin and now with TikTok. This company is currently valued at $75 billion. We got $3 billion investment from SoftBank. Back when we recorded the podcast last year, we were discussing how could this company possibly be worth $20 billion. So what's happened there? That is a huge change in valuation. I've been looking into it recently and trying to work out how this is possible. How can we see such fast growth over a short time? And is this company really worth $75 billion? I think a lot of people are asking that right now.
Yeah, and I think that with the way that valuations are going these days, it's a very valid question to ask. But from people that I talk to, people who work at ByteDance, people who've worked with ByteDance in a few different aspects, they have very good feedback about the company and about the working culture. And then you look at their ability to monetize, in particular through advertisements, and their advertising revenue is doing pretty well from what we understand. So it's I think that the company itself is absolutely fascinating. They've really just kind of started from nothing, and rather than taking investment from one of the bigger players, so Baidu, Alibaba, or Tencent, they've really struck out on their own. And they've been perhaps one of the only companies in recent history that's actually been able to do that. So not being part of, like the Tencent content ecosystem, not being part of the Alibaba e-commerce ecosystem, and really in basically creating their own. And I think what's really interesting is kind of what's their China strategy in terms of Douyin. Like, what are they going to do with that? Are they going to try to make it into a super platform or a super app like WeChat? Are they going to have many programs? We can probably talk about that closer to the end of the episode. But their ability to scale the Douyin product, I think, just really goes to show how talented they've been in creating the back end. Because you think about, of course, when you look at Douyin, I think that they obviously put a lot of thought into the user interface and the design language that they've used in Douyin, and now with TikTok, you're actually seeing Chinese advertisements here in the mainland copying that similar kind of design language with the whites and the purples and the pinks and the kind of, I don't even know what color, like the purplish blue that's in their app, and also kind of the shaking kind of fonts and things. And so they've obviously done a lot of research and put a lot of thought into that. But the real power of Douyin and Toutiao is the back end, and so their ability to continually serve short videos, to users and keep them inside the app, and not just that, of course, but then also producing content. Actually getting people to want to produce content. It's just the success story of the year.
Yeah, totally. So with regard to the advertisement from, ByteDance is an advertising company for sure. That is where all of their revenue is coming from, as far as I can work out. I think that they also do have a KOL platform that they launched recently for Douyin. So there could be there will be a model there as well of like taking a cut from KOLs in a similar way to what Weibo does. Which we covered on an episode before with Eli from Parklu. So they're going to run that model with KOLs for sure. But right now it's all about these full screen, vertical video advertisements, which are actually very compelling. They have very good conversion rates, and if you use the product yourself, if you use Douyin, TikTok's not monetized right now. To my knowledge, there's no advertisement on TikTok. But if you use the China version Douyin, you're going to see adverts on a regular basis. So there's a splash screen advert when you open the app once a day. The fourth video that you open will be an advertisement typically. And then after that fourth video, every 5 minutes that you're watching video content, a new advert will appear. So if you look at the typical user time spent in the app, which is about half an hour a day, roughly, according to some estimations, you're going to be seeing one splash screen ad and then around about 6 newsfeed ads. And all of these advertisements are full screen. They're quite immersive. They have relatively good conversion rates, and they're quite expensive. So this model, when you add it up, so Douyin in China has about 150 million daily active users, was the last number that ByteDance officially gave. So you put all those numbers together, although they don't have a full inventory, I'm sure they're not running, it's not every possible advertisement space is used up. The advertising revenue from that is incredible. We're talking very large numbers, and it does, in my mind, if we just look at, that's just looking at Douyin. We're not TikTok actually Toutiao daily headline runs a similar model. It's obviously not video content, it's articles, but it's still a news feed. The advertisements are less compelling in my opinion. They're not the full screen ones we see on Douyin, but the model of how those advertisements are shown to the user is similar, and they also have a very, very high DAU. And then we've got TikTok, which is really just getting going, but has potential to have an even higher number of users in the long term than either of those platforms, and can run a very similar model to what Douyin's doing, given that they basically are the same product. So the revenue potential for this company is actually very, very significant, and I think it does. But if they can break the American market, if they can break out globally, this is the big question right now. If they, this is why they're throwing so much money at YouTube ads on all these different platforms to gain for user acquisition right now. You're seeing a lot of people complaining about it. Actually, there's a lot of talk. I'm seeing adverts for this silly new app TikTok everywhere, because right now they're going for it. They're really going for it, and they want to break out and make TikTok as popular outside China as it is inside China on a global scale. If they can achieve that, then this company really, I truly believe this company is another Facebook. It's on that scale, which I don't think people have really woken up to that yet. People are waking up to it. That ByteDance is the new BAT event. Well, it's looking like, we can't say now for sure, but given today where we are today, it's looking like ByteDance is the new B in that BAT, or it will be, given how things are going. If they can break, I think the key question is, can they really break in properly into the US market?
Well, that is the big question, and so looking from a product perspective and from a business perspective, there's a lot of good things that we can say about them. Looking to be honest, from a PR communications and kind of in some ways, even there are other products like Top Buzz in the States or in the West, and as well as Hello in India. They're not doing such a good job, and they're not dealing with the public reaction very well either. So specifically, a lot of this kind of surfaced for us. We've written a little bit about Top Buzz. Top Buzz is their Toutiao, but in English, and as a product, it's very clear that it has not been getting a lot of love. It's, when we wrote about it, it was serving a lot of fake news. Of course, we talked to the PR, and they're like, well, yeah, sure, it's there, but we're fixing it. And the thing is, they haven't really done a good job of fixing it. And then with Hello in India, this is something that's just blowing up now. Part of it is India, and kind of what they're competing with in India. With share chat, they use very similar tactics, where the online media space in India, it's not as tightly controlled as the traditional media space, and so there's a lot of nonsense, and I think it's similar to what we see around the world. Point being is that that this is going to be a real problem for them, and it's an image issue as well. So we've published a little bit about some of the shenanigans that they've done with Hello, with Top Buzz, and some other areas of their business. And so I think that their biggest challenge really is whether or not they're going to be able to communicate effectively. In like, especially when it comes to like fake news, or when it comes to people like pedophiles, using Musical.ly. There was this really interesting case earlier this year where a YouTuber who just decided to completely troll Musical.ly, but he did so in a way that only used videos from Musical.ly available on YouTube, and what he showed was that there's a lot of weird stuff going on with underaged people, both boys and girls, and then the drama really started when this YouTuber, and we'll include the link in the show notes, when this YouTuber got a copyright strike from YouTube based upon a complaint from ByteDance. And so again, this was a video about Musical.ly, and then after ByteDance bought Musical.ly, this YouTuber was given a copyright strike. And in the copyright strike documentation, the filer said that they were using the Musical.ly a logo or trademarks without permission. And of course, it made no sense because there's tons of Musical.ly videos on YouTube. After this blows up on Reddit, then Google retracts the copyright strike, but we don't hear anything from ByteDance whatsoever. And then, of course, you add on top of, and so, and we wrote a little bit about that. We weren't able to get any kind of like real statement from them about this issue. We haven't been able to get any real statement from them about fake news on Top Buzz or Hello. And so, again, from the business side, I think that, from what I know about people who work there, for people who have worked with them, advertisers and stuff like that, they all seem pretty pleased. But they're going to really have a big issue when it comes to communications if they don't figure this out. Because if they are still serving fake news, if they are not making appropriate measures to protect minors on their platforms, I mean, this is going to be a big problem once it actually becomes part of any public discussion.
Yeah. I think I've read the articles you're referring to. We can link them in the show notes. Certainly, this company is very aggressive. They are very Chinese in the way they do things, and as we said earlier, they've managed to grow up without taking money from Alibaba or Tencent. That's very difficult to do. They're very independent, and it goes to and they're well known for using Hei Gongguan, right? The black PR techniques. But they even got called out by Pony Ma for doing it publicly. This company,
that's right. Yeah,
I mean, that's a big thing. I think, they wouldn't. I don't think Pony Ma would make a statement like that if it wasn't a serious problem. That this company is using very morally questionable PR techniques on a regular basis. So but to be fair to them on their side, like, probably they need, growing up in that environment where it's almost impossible for anyone to independently build their own house, build their own empire without, being subjugated to one of the two giants. But they've managed to achieve it. Perhaps in China, it's a little bit like when we talked about in earlier episodes about the company culture with Uber, that they have this sort of that their culture in many respects is built around the early stage of the company growing up in an environment that was very, very hostile, where they're having to deal, essentially break laws in order to grow because of the local level governments. It's so corrupt, and there's so much murky stuff going on with local taxi providers with local governments, and that being a sort of monopoly situation. That the only way that Uber could actually grow was to use these tactics and to have this culture that it's us against the world, and anything, almost anything is okay in terms of getting the result. I I think to some degree, ByteDance probably does have that kind of dynamic going on. But I also think you're quite correct to point out that if they keep along, if they don't adjust the course and change their attitude towards this, it's going to come back and bite them eventually. Fortunately, globally, most of the attention and most of the outrage and the bad will towards social products is squarely aimed at Facebook right now. They're taking a lot of slack, and a lot, media's going after them with expose after expose. Since Cambridge Analytica, it really hasn't, things have been going terrible for them. It's been an awful year for Facebook. So actually, in that respect, when we look outside China, and going back to the big question is, can ByteDance actually make TikTok a globally competitive product of scale? One of the big questions is will they get cloned by Facebook? Will Facebook do to them what they did to all their other major competitors, right? The Snap being the classic case with stories, because they are really the major player in social and in news feeds globally, so dominant that if they want to just copy what ByteDance is doing and then drive their massive user base over into a new kind of similar product, then that could be one of the major reasons that ByteDance doesn't fulfill its potential and doesn't realize the same success outside China that they've managed to achieve inside China. So I think that plays into this dynamic a lot. I think that's why we're seeing ByteDance move so fast, why they're burning so much money right now on user acquisition with advertisements on YouTube, because really they do need to move fast. I think they are a threat to Facebook, and Facebook must know this. And they're not a direct threat in terms of their. TikTok won't replace Facebook. You're still going to use Facebook. You're still going to use Instagram. But what they would do is take a considerable amount of attention and time away from those platforms, and spending that time on your phone, that attention when you want to just open up your phone and waste 5 minutes when you're waiting at a bus stop. That's what Facebook monetizes. That's how they make their money as an advertisement driven business. And so that's going to really hit them hard. So in China, we've seen a lot of talk about how ByteDance has taken time away from Tencent, right? And that is harming Tencent. And that's partially why we've seen Tencent's stock price fall so sharply this year, is because of the rise of Douyin. And how that the advertisement potential of Tencent is reduced now because there's this other player, there's this other ecosystem in the market which is an alternative to Tencent. And there's been statistics bandied around, and the big one is that 6% of the time on Tencent products has moved over directly into sort of ByteDance products. And now ByteDance, in terms of time on the phone, is like number 2 player in the market, ahead of Baidu, ahead of Alibaba, just in terms of attention. So that's bad for Tencent, but it's not so bad. They are insulated from it, because for them advertisement revenue is really less than 20% of their overall revenue. It's not their core revenue generator. They make a lot more from things like gaming, obviously, micropayments and value-added services in across all different kinds of products, music, literature, manga, all these areas they dominate, and then of course payments on top of that. And now they're trying to, with their big pivot, they're moving into cloud services. So Tencent's actually very, very diversified. But when you look at Facebook, they're not diversified at all. This is an advertisement business. This is completely driven around news feeds and attention. And so if a company like ByteDance comes outside of China and actually gets a foothold in the American market and becomes a serious alternative to where brands are going to spend advertisement dollars online, That's a big problem for Facebook, potentially, because this company is aggressive. This is not Snapchat. This is not MySpace. These guys are serious. They've proved themselves. They've gone from 0 to 1 in China, and now they're moving internationally. They're super aggressive. They're totally fine with using dark PR techniques. They're totally fine with burning money at an incredible rate in order to gain market share. I don't think Facebook has ever seen a competitor like this. So the dynamic is really interesting right now, and then added into this, ByteDance is an AI company. They're really embracing this new technology much more than Facebook or other people in this area. So there's that dynamic of how far can this technology actually take us? It's taken us into bad areas in places like India, as you've just alluded to, John, earlier. Like when you let algorithms dictate what's in your app so much, then it can have negative consequences. But it's also pretty undeniable that the technology can make your platform and the user experience truly compelling. Do you actually use either Douyin or TikTok, just out of interest, John? Like, what's your opinion on the product itself?
So for me, there's two ways of looking at it. There's from kind of a product perspective, and then from a kind of ethical perspective, let's say. So from a product perspective, it's amazing. So for my own personal reasons, I don't use it any longer because it has the ability to be very addictive. And I get addicted to things, especially electronic things, very easily. So I used Douyin for about a day, and I was like, okay, this is something that, like, 15 seconds, like, oh my God, like, it's amazing, candy for the brain. And if I don't delete this app right now, it's going to cause some real problems in my life. So from that perspective, if you think about it in terms of stickiness, I mean, it's great. Again, from an ethical perspective, and obviously businesses, they don't necessarily have to worry about this, and so it's not necessarily in that sense. But from an ethical perspective, I don't like it. Because that's exactly it. It's intellectual cotton candy. It's bite-sized videos that you just go through and you scroll the entire time. And so, we're talking about Facebook, WeChat as well. I mean, this is how both of these companies, all of these companies, have kept people in, is through the feed. And making sure that there's always some kind of new content for people to consume. And I think what works especially well is social content of some kind. Whereas Douyin and TikTok, they're focusing a lot on UGC, user generated content. WeChat and Facebook, they're focusing a lot on social content, so content about your friends or your family, drama that's going on inside whatever social circles you're a part of, and so in that sense, I don't like it, but at the end of the day, it's just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's not going to be successful. I just think that it's more of a question of just where we are in the tech industry these days. And this is kind of going back to, I think, some of the points that I was making previously, is that when they do enter, as they grow in the U.S. market, they're going to have a lot more trouble. So, speaking of black PR, so Elliot, he's written quite a bit about them. He had one of his pieces that we published in English, translated and then published on Huxiu. And then Huxiu is syndication partners with 21st Century Business News, if I remember correctly. I forget the Chinese name, but anyway, so basically they republished that his article about TikTok and the problems with underage users, and someone at ByteDance was able to actually get that article removed from WeChat, and so they were able to report it to WeChat admins, and they removed it based upon copyright infringement. So obviously a BS excuse. So as you were saying, Matt, they are extremely aggressive. They're more than willing to burn cash. They're more than willing to do things that, while unethical perhaps, are kind of normal in China. But the problem is, of course, is that once they go to the States, they can't do that anymore. If they do that, and it's exposed, they're going to have a lot of problems. I mean, you look at Uber. Yes, Uber was extremely aggressive. It was underdog, taking on the corrupt localities and the taxi unions and things like that. And so I think that in general, the Uber and the ride sharing model, at least in China, has had a lot of positive impact. But the problem is of course that now people don't like Uber. And they're having a really hard time kind of pulling back from the brink. I mean, investors don't even like Uber. I mean, of course, a lot of it was Kalanick himself and his personality. But the thing is with Facebook and ByteDance. I mean, yes, of course, there's a lot of attention being focused on Facebook, but that same exact attention and that same exact complaints that people have with Facebook, they're going to have about ByteDance. And so again, like their seeming inability to really have a public conversation about these issues, to me is very concerning. Concerning obviously in an ethical sense, but also concerning in a business sense, because this is a really big blind spot for them. And we're recording this episode after we talked with Shai Oster at the information, but the publishing is backwards, or the publishing is going to be backwards. But I think that one of the things that we talk about with him is that there's a lot more information about China, about what's happening in Chinese tech these days. And so, I mean, speaking of egregious business practices, I think like 360 is a really good example. Lao Zhou, like total businessman warrior, just not taking any crap from anyone. If he has to push people around, if he has to be an asshole, he was going to do it. I think that from what I understand, he's mellowed down a lot. But I think that fundamentally he's still very very much the same in terms of not taking any shit. Pardon the French. So that type of aggressiveness, it worked well for 360. It's working very well for ByteDance in the home market. But it's going to be a really big problem for them going out. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they actually end up handling this.
Yep. Yeah. Totally. But it's interesting. Their product, the actual platform, isn't very social. It's not based around social. It's not based around social nodes in a network. It's based around matching content with users. So you don't.
Well, I think that's. So I think in that sense that's where the network effect comes in, right? And so it's not social in the traditional sense, like what you mean, but it is social in the sense that why is YouTube so popular? YouTube is so popular. Why is Twitch so popular? Because people like to watch other people do stuff. And more and more people don't like to watch TV as much. They don't like to. I mean, obviously, if it's a high production value, they still do. But in terms of like most of time spent, I mean, it's moving more and more towards UGC. And so by social, I mean like there is some kind of interaction there, and it's a two-sided marketplace in that sense, where you have the people, the suppliers, so the people creating the content, and then the buyers, the people actually consuming the content.
Yeah, I think it's much more like a two-sided marketplace than a traditional social network, and that's part of the reason why they are attacking. I believe they're attacking the American market so hard right now, because there is an obvious question to be asked, which I don't think I've seen anyone discuss in online publicly in media yet, which is why America? Why go for America in the first place? It's a horrible market. Most for Chinese companies, right? It's the hardest market for Chinese companies to go into. If you look at products before from China, like WeChat, classic example. WeChat's done horribly in America. Martin Lau's even been on the record saying like this is a market we're just not going to do anything in. It's the toughest market for a Chinese company to move into. and now you've got a trade war happening, and it's quite clear that Chinese companies are getting blocked from making any kind of acquisitions or movements into sensitive areas. Why would ByteDance even be thinking about taking on the American market? Surely they would be spending money on taking the rest of the world, focusing on Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Middle East, parts of Southern Europe perhaps, and places like South America or Mexico would make a lot more sense, surely. So I think that question should be analyzed as well. Like, I'm not 100% sure of why that is, but my gut feeling is that because it is a two-sided marketplace, as we just said, having those high-quality content creators is essential for the global success of the product. So, globally, American culture is so dominant that I think ByteDance realizes that they need American content creators if they're really going to really dominate this market and be safe, get to a market leading position where they're safe from Facebook, or relatively safe from Facebook cloning them. They need to have those American content creators. They need to have a critical mass of quality, really high quality content being produced from the market which is culturally dominant globally, which is the States. So I think that's why they're going in so heavily. And it is, the real risk there is, because they're Chinese, if I was Facebook right now, I would be lobbying heavily in Washington against this Chinese company coming in and potentially corrupting our youth with this, with these algorithms, these AI-empowered algorithms, which are causing problems all over the world, and also letting the media know about that as well. What we're actually seeing, is in the media, I think, it's quite clear that ByteDance is paying a lot of journalists to write good articles about them. I'm not going to name names or bring anything up, but I've seen quite obvious paid media from different sources in the States now. ByteDance is paying a lot of people to write good things about them. But at some point, I imagine already behind the scenes there is starting to be a clash. Facebook must be they must be concerned, I think, about what's going on. And then there's also the dynamics about Musical.ly, right? And what they did there with so ByteDance bought Musical.ly and merged the platforms together, and then there was a big outcry from Musical.ly users, and there seems to be a lot of dissatisfaction with that move that they made. A lot of people questioned why they would do such a thing as well. So I don't think that's been analyzed too much at a deep level in media. And from what I understand from speaking to people in the company, it's really quite simple in that they're just looking at acquiring that user base. They're really just buying Musical.ly. Musical.ly actually, in terms of content, totally, is actually very different from. So I've noticed actually from using all of these products is, although the actual platform, the product. So Musical.ly was actually the first to innovate in this area, and they actually built a whole experience of which all of these three platforms are based around. But because the content ecosystems are so different between TikTok, Douyin, and Musical.ly, they actually end up being very different user bases and having, a very different appeal. Like for me, I actually quite like using Douyin. I think it's a great product, and I'll spend time on it on a daily basis when I'm in China. But for me, Musical.ly before, it's just horrible. It's just full of kids doing stupid miming videos. I would never use that product. It's I'll try it out to see what it's about, but am I going to use it on a daily basis? Never. It's awful for me. But so the same sort of algorithmic, same sort of platform in terms of how it's set up, with the full screen video and commenting and likes and all that is exactly the same in terms of the core experience. But what's really, really key is the content ecosystem. And so I think that's what ByteDance really needs to build. And we're seeing them doing that now. They're spending big money. They brought on who was the Cali B? I'm probably saying it wrong. They brought some big influencers onto the platform very, very recently, right? there was also a comedian that they paid to join the platform exclusively. Oh, Jimmy Fallon. There we go. Jimmy Fallon and Cardi B are the two big names just in like the last few days. I think that they've announced will be producing content on TikTok. Do those names mean anything to you, John? To me, like, I'm not American, right? So I have no idea.
Well,
Jimmy Fallon, I have no idea who Jimmy Fallon is.
So Jimmy Fallon has one of the most successful late night shows in the States. So in the tradition of Johnny Carson and David Letterman and Jay Leno, there's been a real bloom, if as it were, of late night talk shows. Jimmy Kimmel has one, Fallon has one, Stephen Colbert has one, and then Craig something or other, I think. Honestly, I mean, I'm not quite sure. I just know what I see on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, Jimmy Fallon's a big name. I don't know about the other one, Cardi B. But they've already gotten interest from online KOLs. So American KOLs who were kind of really big with Vine, and then Twitter kind of shut down Vine, and they moved to Instagram, they moved to YouTube, and now they're moving over to TikTok. And so people with a lot of content production experience, and with a decent enough following that even some Chinese people recognize them, that they're actually moving on to TikTok and to Douyin. I was just looking it up while you were talking, and I think that it's really the point about like WeChat, like having had like what's the difference, let's say, between WeChat and Douyin? I mean, there's a lot of obvious differences, right? But I think that the biggest one is about user habits. And at the end of the day, the biggest reason that WeChat is going to have a difficult time going into the States is number one, the market for a separate messaging app isn't going to be that great. I mean, you already have Facebook Messenger, you already have WhatsApp, you already have Signal, you already have Telegram, and so in that sense, users are already being served for this kind of thing. Whereas WeChat got started in 2011, there wasn't really anything like it, and it's been built on top of that. Also, I mean, the way that Chinese people versus Americans, let's say, use these products are very, very different. And their expectations are going to be very, very different. I mean, we had this conversation a while back when I first started using Telegram, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the UX in Telegram was like amazing compared to WeChat, which is, their iteration speed is quite slow, and perhaps for some good reasons. But whereas, with like a product like Douyin or TikTok, I mean, so people were already used to Snapchat by the time that Musical.ly came around. People were already used to kind of scrolling through a feed on Instagram and having pictures pop up of whomever. And of course, as video started to take off, that became more and more of a thing. Musical.ly launched in 2014, and in about 2 years they went from zero to having a huge audience. And all it was a minute clip, mostly of video clips of people lip syncing. And so in that sense, I think from a user experience perspective, that the reason that TikTok can succeed is because it's no different. The way that Douyin is structured in China is only going to be slightly different from the way that TikTok is structured as a product and in terms of user experience, which I think is really interesting for another reason. But at the end of the day, that's the real difference, because again, it's that two-sided marketplace. It's that people are creating the content that they want to create for their own culture, and then people in that culture are consuming that content. But a really interesting point, I mean, like the globalization of user experience. I mean, we talk about world peace all the time, and we talk about, or not you and I, but people talk about, these types of globalization and these types of things, and crossing cultures and stuff. But I mean, if TikTok can be successful, and if they keep it basically the same as Douyin, I mean, that just goes to show just how similar we're all becoming. I mean, of course, men around the world are going to wear suits, and that's very much a Western thing. But an argument could be made that we're really kind of seeing the beginnings of a Chinese-led kind of aesthetic almost. Obviously that's a bit of a stretch, and certainly I'm just kind of coming up with this off the top of my head, but yeah, so for me, I think that when we're looking at Douyin and we're looking at TikTok, they've basically been able to build a product. So the market was already there, the user habits was already there, and they were able to come in with their technology, with their amazing design experience, and just build on top of that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. I've been thinking about why is there such a big difference in terms of short video usage habits in China and the rest of the world. Short video is a vibrant market, and Douyin's leading it, but we also see very large players. And then outside China, Vine was a thing, and now it's gone. Instagram is kind of doing Instagram TV, which seems to be failing, and is not about short form video. It's about long form, longer videos. We have YouTube. Yeah, of course it leads into all the dynamic. This is why it's so interesting, because I think the real answer to this question is that so much of what products we use and how we use them is dictated by the dynamics of the giant companies that control these apps. So because Facebook is so dominant globally in the social arena and the newsfeed arena, we don't see, and they haven't moved into this area. They haven't moved properly into short video. We see that there is this space for ByteDance to move into. And the example you gave of WeChat, I think, is very relevant, because when WeChat, back in 2012, 2013, wants to move outside of China, messaging was already a very established product category, and so there's a lot of competitors globally. In fact, they're coming late to this party, and that's why they can't really gain traction they gain traction in basically very, very few markets globally, because there's already messaging apps there with network effects very strong in local markets. But here with short video, this is an area that's kind of strange in that it's so popular in China, it's much less popular outside China, and I think there is a really big white space for ByteDance to attack and move into, because as we're seeing right now with the user numbers and the traction that TikTok's gaining around the world, is that this user experience of micro videos, which are like 15 seconds and just scrolling up, is addictive, and it's addictive for pretty much all cultures around the world. We have video platforms globally like YouTube, but this is actually a much more accessible and addictive user experience, and that doesn't matter whether you're Chinese or whether you're American or wherever you are. That's this is holding true. And so if we take that as being true, then actually the prospects for ByteDance are actually pretty good. I think we can be quite bullish about the opportunity for them globally.
Yeah, and so I think it's really kind of interesting to take a look at trends in user habits. I think because you look at YouTube and Twitch and things like that. And YouTube in particular, because of server limitations, they started off and you could only upload like 5 minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes at one point. Now you can upload files that are like 8 hours, and some people do actually take the time to watch these 8-hour videos. And then of course Twitch, which is all live streaming, it's all in real time, and streamers stream up to people they do marathons sometimes of like 24 hours, where they're streaming the entire time. Maybe they'll take breaks here and there, but they're streaming for 24 hours. And then of course you can watch the video on demand, but this is all very long form. And so what's interesting, so there is more of a demand for long form content, for speeches and for podcasts, kind of like what you and I are doing here, Matt. But I think that also, there's in terms of I mean, what we're seeing is the rising popularity of longer form stuff, but what that also means that on the other end of it, that there is that opportunity for short form, for these really short things that no one else for whatever reason is really looking at, and I think that it's. I mean, at the end of the day, the product is actually really simple. It's all it is you're taking the feed, which has proven to be addictive, I would say, ever since, even RSS. I mean, when I first started using RSS back in like 2011 or something like that, I was addicted to RSS. Facebook, a lot of their value has been built off the feed. Instagram is pure feed. Twitter is pure feed. And so what they've done is they've put it's short video applied to that feed. And of course, the short chunks of information, are extremely addictive. 9gag does it. They have really decent traffic numbers. Reddit, in a lot of senses, is the feed as well. A bit more high quality content, if you ask me, because it's all user generated and there's very little curation from the company itself. But yeah, that's really kind of what Douyin and TikTok are, is short video applied to the feed, and the feed is like the killer format for the mobile age.
And it's monetizable, right?
Yeah.
That is highly monetizable. There's a very, very well established business model around it, and when you're in these very addictive apps that people are spending a lot of time in, you're in a feed 100% of the time almost, right? You can comment. There are sort of other things going on, and actually this is long term a bit of a question. To be honest, I don't think it's a problem today at all, but like long term you have to ask where does ByteDance take Douyin? Where does it take TikTok in terms of building it out into a super app, as you mentioned before? Like, what other kind of user experiences make sense within this environment of this full screen immersive video newsfeed? Messaging, I don't think makes too much sense. It's an obvious thing to move into, but I don't think it really works. I can't see as a user, and I've used these products extensively, how why would I want to do that? How would that work together with this current user experience? I just don't see it at all. You've got e-commerce. That's probably a little bit better. You could probably, work in something similar to Meituan Dianping, where when you see a video of a really nice hotel or a really nice restaurant or some amusement park or whatever, then there's a link there to immediately go and buy a ticket for the amusement park or buy a ticket for the movie or whatever it is that the short video is featuring. That makes a lot more sense in terms of discovery of restaurants or local services. So I can see them doing more in that area, but then moving out into something that's a lot more sticky, like messaging, I think will be difficult. But having said that, I think the business is lucrative enough as it is. You're totally right what you're saying before about short video, and it's because mobile. The reason why long form video is less attractive, I think, for the current generation is because of mobile. On mobile, time is fragmented, right? So you want something that's quick and fast, and that you can open up, and you want something basically that you can watch on the toilet. A lot of this stuff boils down to that. I think there's an old quote that always sticks in my mind from Alan Zhang, the founder of the WeChat team, says, content on WeChat should be something that you can read on the toilet. And that's been something that a philosophy that they've taken forward with their content ecosystem. And Douyin and TikTok are perfect. Absolutely perfect for something that you would just sit down and find, while you're in the toilet for a couple of minutes, look at some micro videos, some short videos, or if you're on the subway, similar thing. And especially now with the bandwidths and data becoming so cheap, full screen video was something before that you might download while you're on a Wi-Fi at your home, and then only and put it on your device, and then when you're on the subway, not rather than streaming, just play it directly from your device, having pre-downloaded. Now I think we're moving into an era where you can stream anywhere. So again, this wasn't the case a couple of years ago, and we're living in a new world now where this is possible, and so that really helps this dynamic as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really kind of interesting. I mean, looking at possible directions for Douyin. Let's just focus on Douyin for the time being and the China market. So I really do kind of wonder where they're going to take it. Again, like we hear a lot of talk. People are theorizing that they're going to have mini programs or mini apps or something like that inside. I mean, obviously messaging makes no sense. It's a completely different experience. I think what you were saying before about some kind of commerce or retail component is actually probably the most compelling use case for them. China's one of the most successful business models has been the integration of social and e-commerce or content and e-commerce. And so moving into that, I think it seems to be like the most compelling next step for them in terms of if they do want to expand their reach and really kind of go into different areas outside of pure content and pure advertising. I think the only issue that I can see there is like, if they decide to do that, how defensible would that actually be for them, right? Like how hard would it be for Dianping to start doing short video? And I don't think it would be that difficult. Whether or not they could actually convince people to do it, of course, is a great question. But the thing is, like, short video at the end of the day, outside of Douyin, it's just another potential feature. We talk about how what Facebook did with Snapchat. The same thing happened with Tuangou, with group buying, where e-commerce platforms and retail platforms, they said, oh, well, this is just another way to give coupons, and so we're just going to call everything Tuangou, and that's what they did. And then we see what the market looks like today, where there's no Tuangou company anymore. I mean, like Meituan. It's not a Tuangou company, So when it comes to integrating retail or offline experiences or even e-commerce, again, how difficult would it be for a Dianping or an Alibaba just to copy that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is the great points, because in China, the environment's so competitive, and Alibaba, Tencent have moved into offline so heavily to build moats around their business that things like, could you imagine them successfully moving into payments? No. I mean, that game's won. It's the ship sailed. The ByteDance is going to find it very difficult to move into payments. They're going to find it very difficult to move into cloud services. They're too late. All of this, what Alibaba and Tencent are focusing on, and they've been very consistent in saying this for a while, is what Tencent in terms of industrial internet, right, which is based around what they believe in literally the next decade. They're thinking like a decade out of how digitalization will happen to vertical industries like healthcare, like education, like retail, all of these sectors of the economy, and most of the opportunity and the value will lie in working directly with the best-in-class market leaders in those categories to digitalize and optimize their services and embrace AI, embrace potentially AR, VR in the future, big data, all of these technologies which they are starting to have big impacts. Whereas ByteDance really is a pure online play right now. They're not really very embedded in the offline economy at all. But if they are the only Chinese major player, well, not the only one, but if in the future they do manage to do really successfully outside China, they are very well positioned to take the lessons and the learnings from China and apply those outside to markets outside China, where they have the online play established already. Even if it's a platform like TikTok, which is short video, it seems to be very unrelated to these other more serious areas, let me say, like cloud services or whatever. But ByteDance is not going to stop at TikTok. TikTok is going to be their foot in the door, and then 5 years down the road, they're going to have, they're going to build out their family of apps, which they already have very well established in China, into all of these other different markets. They're going to make acquisitions because they're going to have a huge valuation. They're going to have plenty of money in the bank. This is a very aggressive company. You're going to see them move. I think long term down the road, this is why I think we're really at a turning point right now. It's a very interesting time. If ByteDance can be successful properly outside China, they're going to be a bridge between China and the rest of the world in terms of taking the learnings and applications of what happens in the Chinese internet sector and applying those more directly outside. And I think you're going to start to see them do similar things to what Alibaba and Tencent have done inside China, outside China.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge, man.
It's just scary now, but I can see, you can see the sort of patterns, and this is what I'm anticipating. All speculation at the moment, but this is what I'm kind of seeing.
Yeah, no, I mean, on the one hand, I think that what you're sketching out is compelling. On the other hand, I think you also have a pretty good track record with these kinds of things. But I think we're getting close to time. One thing that I did want to mention in terms of business model very, very quickly is something that, Matt, you mentioned earlier, and the fact that they're an artificial intelligence company, and so looking at possible consumer applications of artificial intelligence. I mean, of course, the big one is facial recognition. But I do have to wonder. I mean, so if I was sitting on the board, or if I was an executive, you looking at their core strength and looking at their core competency, and of course that is user experience. That's how they've been able to really build. But at the end of the day, what's really driving them forward and helping them to continue to be successful is their recommendation engine, is their ability to collect and process data and give people the content that they want. And so I'm really kind of curious, and to be honest, I don't have a good answer for this. I don't have any prediction. But I really do have to ask, I really have to wonder, so what could they do with artificial intelligence that no one else is doing? And again, it kind of goes back to my previous point. Everyone's talking about mini programs and super apps. I mean, I think that if you look at the history of this company, they're not going to follow a traditional model. They're not going to follow what Tencent has done. They're not going to follow what Alibaba has done. They're really good. I mean, Zhang Yiming, he's shown to be a person with some pretty serious vision. And so I think that what we're going to see from them is going to be quite unique. And internationally, Matt, I think that, again, that's a really interesting point. And yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, foreign companies coming to China, but there is, the huge challenge of Chinese companies going out as well. And it would be stunning, I think, if they could actually lock down the foreign markets before Alibaba and Tencent get a chance. I think that ByteDance it's a fascinating company. I personally don't necessarily trust them to have society's best interests in mind. And of course, fiduciary responsibility does not necessarily include that. But they make a great product, and I think that it's just been absolutely fascinating to watch them be as successful as they've been.
Yeah, but we wish that they would be a little bit change their PR strategy a little bit and be just a little bit less aggressive, and with doing the dark stuff. ByteDance is going to be a poster child for Chinese internet companies, whether they like it or not. So I think they need to address that. Yeah.
Definitely. All right.
As a social company, right? They'll be in the same way that Facebook, when you're a social company and everybody, you're customer facing, you're like Facebook, you're a platform that people use on a daily basis. You just come under so much more scrutiny than everyone else.
And that's about all the time we have for this episode of China Tech Talk. As always, thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a review on iTunes, or you can go to Overcast or Pocket Cast and tap on that star button, and it will recommend this episode to your network. Also, we are on Himalaya and Spotify, so you can find us there if you haven't already. And also a quick reminder, TechNode, we do several newsletters every single day, including a curated summary of technology news in China, including some of the stuff from us, and a thrice weekly newsletter looking at significant fundings over the last couple of days. You can go to technode.com/newsletters to subscribe.